Welcome back, everyone. 皆さん、お帰りなさい。今日は、1、2、3、4、5、ね ?6。60日目です。Ignore your Discord message? Your Discord message? What do you mean? I didn't get any Discord message. Oh. Well, I mean, I went live the moment you sent it. Hey, Procol. I know, right? Alright, so it's day 60. We're probably not going to hit the 7 p.m. review, so we'll move right past it. I doubt it's going to take me 30 minutes to finish 58 reviews, but we'll see. Let's get right into it. Okay. Yo.
近日金
So what's up, Procol? How are you?
Ushiro.
Shiro.
Sachi
Sachi.
Suisei.
Suisei. Let's just go straight to Kawa. Yes.
Nyūryoku
入力。
地中
地中。
近年。
近年。 Wait. Okay. Oops.
外国
Gaikoku. Do you think the knowledge and wisdom you gain from learning language has given you more beneficial skills that can be applied elsewhere than anything else you've learned? No. But they are beneficial skills that I can apply anywhere. When you apply it elsewhere, it's based on the creativity and the novelty of your ingenuity. So, generally speaking, oh there, Hank. You've gained learning a language implies, well, I learn with intent. I don't learn passively most of the time. So since I'm streaming this, it requires a lot of intentional planning on my end. So generally speaking, most of the things I intend to do are beneficial skills I can apply or foreseeably apply in the future. It's a way to keep yourself from feeling like you wasted your time, right? So if you're consistently saying that to yourself, then one is passively learning and passively doing things. Doing things with intent implies that that is already given. However, you asked it in the form of a comparison with anything else I've learned. The answer is no, because I consistently do it. So anything else is also the same. Generally, whenever I'm learning something, the statement is usually true. When I'm learning something passively would be something that someone close to me possibly influenced me to try to do. I don't usually have friends and family that are around that applies that type of pressure anymore. When I was younger, I might have felt like that for some skills, but you know, I'm 37 now. Most of the things I choose are with intent. When I was a kid, you can't know these things, right? It's your inexperience, the knowledge and wisdom is non-existent. So generally speaking, when you're younger, you might feel this way sometimes. There are things that you learn or have been obligated to learn that may not have had the greatest application elsewhere. And then once you build all of that, you refine out the things that are no longer relevant, and then you have a foundation, hopefully a foundation and solid core in which you intentionally learn new things, right? So I don't think I've passed maybe the age of 15. I actually think I would go earlier, past the age of 13. I don't think I've ever picked anything that didn't have a beneficial skill that applied elsewhere in my life. It also is a testament because I still remember many of the things I've learned since I was 5 years old, if not 2 years old. One of the first harshest lessons that I learned when I was 4 years old is that steam rises. And when you lift a lid, make sure the steam doesn't go into your arm, because I burned my writing arm when I was 4 years old by lifting the lid of a rice cooker. So those are the types of lessons that you tend to have. It was my choice to lift the lid out of curiosity. So that was an intent to learn something, right? And I discovered that, and I kept it with me most of the time. There's a great analogy being built in that one lesson about, while curiosity is fantastic, curiosity come with intent and planning may avoid some pitfalls, like potential injuries to self, right? Okay, so it's an underlying intent to learning that you decide to apply to language learning rather than the language learning itself ending up giving you the skills. Yes. And the nice thing about intent for learning is that you leave it open to have emergent learning skills. So there you go in with an expectation, right? This is both worlds. Lots of times people go in with the goal, right? That's a thing that is commonly done on the internet. So I guess we're going to get to 7 with this. 7 o'clock. When you go in with an intent, that's goal-oriented task management. So that's where it stops for a lot of people. You go in, you have an expectation, and you get that out of the expectation. It's limited to that. For me, I go in with an expectation, leaving with the idea that I will have more than what I came in with. However, when you're asking me if there was beneficial skills, by default, the bottom is that I will have beneficial skills. How many beneficial skills, and if they are different elsewhere, is a yes or no. There will likely, in an isolated case, be skills that I didn't expect to get on the process. However, you're asking if any, so as a large picture, the question is yes to all of the above. Not only can I make a rationale by focusing on only the skills that I didn't plan on getting, there are also skills that I do plan on getting. So the idea is keeping yourself open-minded to the problem-solving nature of learning something. That is different from having someone solve your problems as you're going, right? One of the things that I typically am very discouraging about or disparaging about nowadays is if you are voluntarily learning something, one also has to leave room for problem solving. Emergent beneficial skills do not come about in the learning process if one is adherent to their expectations when they intended to start the learning process in the first place. So for example, if you plan on becoming fluent in Japanese, right, and you have a plan on how to become fluent in Japanese and you stick to that plan, then there's no deviation from it. Not only will you possibly meet your goals, right? That's great. You also eliminate any possibility of any other beneficial skills that emerge from that. Because you don't tend to solve the skills, you tend to find the solutions. That's kind of the pros and cons of the internet. Finding solutions is different from developing solutions. Creating solutions and refining and iterating on solutions is very different from going to the internet and finding solutions that are already made. Now, you can still become fluent in Japanese regardless of which method you use. One is adherently and logically more efficient than the other. And the more efficient path tends to be the more attractive way someone gets their goal. It's irrelevant to me. If I don't become fluent in Japanese, I've already developed plenty of beneficial skills to move ahead with any other skills that I have. So naturally, it's a win-win for me, regardless of how long the process is. I may never get to my goal, but I've already achieved many things in the process of going to that goal. Largely, most of my biggest goals in my life are unattainable. And I say that with a smile because being unattainable means that I get to do it for the rest of my life until death do me part, right? Right. Like the lesson you learned from using bleach with your bare hands. Yeah, the bleach with our bare hands. Yeah. Do you think you can learn something unknown without it giving you any beneficial skills? It's very difficult to... Here's the thing. It's very difficult to decide to do something that is unknown without knowing that it's unknown. So because you don't know, because it's unknown, it will always be beneficial to tackle it. I think maybe I can challenge myself and say, I think I can learn something that is well known to me without giving me any beneficial skills? That would be a challenge. And my answer to that is you gotta become very, very creative about it. So for example, Like, because unknown is default. Unknown is a default. If you are doing something that you knowingly is unknown, regardless of what happens, the default is it's beneficial. Right? As in, like, if you we're not including the risks involved, like bodily injury or something like that, but inherently becoming known of something unknown is, in my opinion, default beneficial. However, what about, let's challenge ourselves. I know where you're going. You're going to a point where, is there a possibility of doing something intentionally but not beneficial, right? Beneficial skills, for example. I have a lot of those. I play a live service game called Neverwinter, and I play a live service game called Phantasy Star 2 New Genesis, and I also play Hearthstone every single day. I play them knowing fully well all the mechanics, all the happenings, all the potential permutations, like 99% of the permutations. And it's so therefore I'm not developing any beneficial skills with those tasks. However, now we enter a second sphere of maintenance or mental maintenance. I'm using them as a collective space for consistent building, for practicing, for catharsis. So, like meditation, one can meditate, clear their mind, and it serves a different purpose. Now, is that skill being developed or new skills are being developed? You may never know. However, consistently from time to time, I'm not developing any new skills there. It's the act of practice. You could also get really nitpicky with the fact that everything you encounter will never be the exact same due to time. Yes, I was going to use that, but we don't need to use that too much. Those things move very, very slowly, right? So technically, yes, there is a possibility of an emergent beneficial skill based on the thing that you've done a very, very long time, consistently, right? Over a course of a lifetime. I've played Neverwinter since beta, so this will be the 12th year come June or July. I think it's June, something like that. And I've played New Genesis for its entire lifetime, which is 4th year, I think, this year. And I've been with Hearthstone since closed beta. And Hearthstone have changed over the years, right? There's new meta, new things, but within the grand scheme of things, I'm not developing new skills. And those skills might not even be beneficial in a sense of applying it anywhere else, right? Video games are very similar. However, the knowledge and the wisdom put together, you kind of just include everything. It's like, the broader the question becomes, the more likely I could say yes most of the time. We have to get really specific before something starts having clarity, right? Or like nuance enough that you can say no or yes to something. If the situation is so slightly different to the point that our body's mind can't process or notice a difference, which then could you consider the same? Maybe. Yes, exactly. Yep. Or you can expand and reductively become so passive that you do not discern the differences anymore. So that's also that's the more common one, I would argue. I would say 70 to 80% of the time, for human beings, complacency and passive participation is what creates the lack of notice of differences or significance. So if you drive to work right now, after a year, you probably won't notice the details in your commute to work anymore. Maybe occasionally some things go haywire and that sticks out like a sore thumb, but rarely do you be able to appreciate it. Largely to the point where that one event that happened out of the 99 other events that persisted consistently will no longer be significant. Kind of, for example, language learning. We're going to bring it back to language learning. Someone may come in and see me make an error, but do they know that 98% of the time I didn't make an error? It's this very specific one. Right. So, it's a pro and con as our brain do not fill our mind with that seem like repeated input. Yeah. Well, it does fill our mind somewhere. Not the conscious, perhaps, but consolidation is an interesting thing. It allows us to skip steps, consolidate. We're not gonna go into like the whole like the visual of liberating brain space in order to consolidate, but it kind of has its charm, its elegance. Do you ever get deja vu in language learning? Yeah, every single day. If you like, deja vu is an interesting concept. Deja vu is recall without knowing it. But you technically get deja vu all the time when you're studying. So, in my opinion, the difference is deja vu is where it's past your awareness, right? Like, I seem to have done this before. Well, logically speaking, I've done this every single day for the last 60 days. So if you actively recall something, it's no longer deja vu. But technically, you're still doing the same repeated input. So sometimes when people say, I think I've seen this before. Like, yeah, you probably have. Right? A specific type of weird permutation that was passive enough. Like, here, this is not like actual science. Like, this is my opinion piece, my opinion response. In terms of deja vu, if you collectively do a lot of things passively for a very long time, like just collectively do a lot of passive things for a very long time, it can bleed to the point that it's so passive that when something happens again, you feel like it's already happened or has happened in some way. However, since your participation in that activity is so passive, the one time it's slightly active and you notice things in a pattern that resembles something from a time that you didn't notice very well, I would consider that deja vu. That's probably the closest thing mechanically I could explain that would occur. And deja vu happens, I would expect deja vu to happen in repeated exercises. The moment you stop actively doing it, though, not the moment when you stay active. The more active you become, the more likely it's treated like recall and memory as opposed to deja vu. Deja vu adds to the point about you taking input without it being consciously stored. Yeah, I think that's how I best describe it. And when you ask me, do I ever get deja vu? I get it all the time. Like, what I mean is, I am no stranger to becoming more and more passive about things that I know. I think I don't want to give people the false impression that, yes, I try my best to stay active when I'm learning. That doesn't mean I'm not human. Things become passive, and when I get those things wrong, it reminds me that I'm being a little passive, right? That kind of thing. It's a very interesting question. I think in Duolingo a couple of times, that's what happened. Like, I swear this has already happened again, kind of thing, right? Like, somewhere this already happened. I'm looking at like a red screen with the wrong answer, and I'm like, I've done this before. I definitely have done this before, but I cannot remember in what nature and how I came about it. That, to me, is deja vu. And I say the same thing when it's not learning and whatnot, but when you're going out and doing random permutations, right? You go out to the world and you have so many other obstacles. The chances of that enough permutations to land on coincidentally a very similar event is less likely. Then that thing becomes a lot more prominent. Deja vu becomes very like shocking, largely because it's a lot rarer when you have more permutations. However, when you're studying things like this, like SRS and stuff, it should naturally be very, very frequent. It's frequent to the point it doesn't feel like deja vu, largely because it's not rare anymore. It's every time you make a mistake, for example, or every time you know an answer and you don't really know why it's the right answer. That's happened a couple times. Like, I know this is the read for this character, but I totally do not understand what the mnemonic is anymore. It does surprise me that I get deja vu daily, as you seem to retain knowledge far above average. Well, yeah, but it's a percentage thing, right? We have to think of it as a percentage thing. I know magnitude-wise, like for example, Procall, perhaps my magnitude is higher than average. So say I remember 100 things as opposed to 60 things. But in that 100, like of that 100 things, it's in a bigger scale of say 200 things. So 100 things will be things that I've lost or like have lost in detail. So it's kind of like a gradient, right? Everyone has their, each individual has their gradient of knowledge that they have and knowledge that they don't, or like the level of fidelity of the knowledge. So if you're comparing like how much is retained, that's a magnitude thing. So with every percent, I probably don't have that much of above average when it comes to retention of percentage across the board, right? If all of us were given 200 things, there are going to be a specific pool of things we don't remember with great fidelity. Now, the question that makes that observation be a little surprising is, where's my threshold? Because we might hit an upper limit and a lower limit. So I don't think WaniKani has ever hit my upper limit yet. Largely, that's what makes it seem like I don't get deja vu. But the things WaniKani are testing is not exceeding my upper limit. There are things I don't notice anymore, though, like, but they're not relevant. They're not relevant to how WaniKani evaluates my knowledge or evaluates my memory, right? And that's kind of one of the things that I feel is very important to understand how metrics work. Metrics only measure a specific thing, right? Correct answers and incorrect answers mean that it doesn't tell you how someone gets to a correct answer and how someone corrects a wrong answer. For example, the metrics are an endpoint. They do not culminate the process. And it's one of those bigger granular things about learning that I feel one is very difficult to communicate to another person. Like, for example, in order for someone to truly understand how I learn and answer something, they would actually have to watch me do this stuff. And I also, it's a two-body problem, I would actively have to speak my mind in order to demonstrate how I got to the right answer. Point for point, right? So play by play. In school and in metrics and in objectives and science in general, the metrics is an endpoint. It only as reliable as the methodology in which you acquire that metric. An understanding of the methodology or the process is essential to understanding what the metric actually measures. In this case, since we're on the internet and we full-heartedly agree, like, trust systems to tell us our metrics, those metrics do not tell you most of those things, because people use metrics for better or for worse. They use efficient metrics without an understanding of what it actually measures. right? Like, for example, how is this metric accurate for competence? Well, let's look at the distribution of performances based on standardized testing. The answer is it varies, right? It varies dramatically. You have someone that this method works like terribly, and then there's someone who like live and breathes by this metric. The idea is the metric is incomplete, right? It is the best they can do given their selection, their sample selection. So WaniKani Co actually went out to write this directly. Like, if it doesn't work for you, use something else. If it works for you, thank you for the support, right? So that's kind of one of those things. When someone says you got 99% correct on WaniKani, is that any different from someone that gets 93% accuracy correct? Is there any chance, what are the chances that someone who gets 90% correct on like Hanza Hero, for example, like my metric, my bottom line metric for Hanza Hero, and why do I get 90%, around 90 to 93% accuracy in Hanza Hero if my WaniKani accuracy is near 100%? Choice. The process is different, and I'm obviously purposely demonstrating that I'm wielding the design choice that Co made for WaniKani. I'm like tweaking the way I'm learning for both, even though they're both technically SRS, right? One permits me to do certain things that allows me to tackle learning in a different way, and then this one does the opposite. So that's a very fun experiment. I like doing that. Doing the same, and this is also related to the whole doing the same and becoming more and more passive. So I don't use WaniKani and Hanza Hero the same. Like, they're very, very different things now. Assuming it takes the same effort to assuming it takes the same effort to retain each piece of knowledge, then it makes more sense that expanding your knowledge wouldn't decrease the commonality of deja vu. Okay. Assuming the same effort to retain each knowledge, alright, makes more sense that expanding your knowledge wouldn't decrease the commonality of deja vu. If it takes the same amount of effort, it wouldn't decrease. That's an interesting thought. I would say it increases. It would likely increase the commonality of deja vu. So, for example, what is it that makes us remember things? What is it that makes it more active and less passive? If effort is quantified as the summation of emotional and logical inputs, for example, I'm including emotional in it because effort, the feeling of effort is so both the subjective and objective inputs to retaining a knowledge, right? If it is always consistent, always the same, right? For a piece of knowledge, whatever that piece of knowledge is, then you are more and more likely to become complacent. And because of that complicity over time, I would argue that deja vu will go up. It is the dynamics of effort or requirements of effort and non-effort, like low effort and high effort. That dynamics is what creates things to be active, because it's interesting. When things suddenly get easier and things suddenly get harder, those are the dynamics that keep complacency at bay. The dynamics of life and tasks is what keeps human from being very passive. And I'm operating on the idea that deja vu comes from passivity, as in not observing details, no longer paying attention. So if you normalize all the efforts to retain any new knowledge coming in, then every knowledge will feel the same, right? Now, logically, logic could help keep deja vu at bay, largely because logic would dictate that the context changes, like the knowledge itself would change, but the nature of the feel of acquiring that knowledge will stay consistent. Everything will feel like it's no easier or no harder, and that does not create contrast. So, like, what is a great analogy for this? Imagine if someone smooth sailed through life. They were born into a billionaire lifestyle, and that billionaire lifestyle, because of that billionaire lifestyle, they no longer require to change any form of their effort, and they decided never to go beyond the lifestyle that they were born into. That will largely create a complacent human being that drifts through life, and life will look like a snap because everything feels the same. There's no easy times, there's no hard times. You have no appreciation for sadness, no appreciation for happiness, right? That's the relativity that our brain works. Reward comes with difficulty, right? And ease comes with relaxation. If you choose to focus on the positive stuff, then ease comes with boredom. If you choose to focus on negativity, and difficulty comes with suffering if you focus on negativity. So without those contrasts, I think life would float you by, and you would feel like the life would be one small, short experience. So because of that, I would say commonality of deja vu will go up because you're no longer interested in your life anymore. This is similar, but the martingale method for gambling is when you place a starting bet, then double the bet each time you lose until you win, which could end up with a large number you win, but when you work it out, you only get the profit of the starting bet. Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, you're right, because if each piece of knowledge has a 5% chance of not being retained to the point of getting deja vu, then that would scale up with the amount of knowledge you have. Yeah, it's a scalar thing. Hear me out. I know this is gonna sound really cliche. It is a cliche. It's a beautiful cliche after talking about all of this in our current state, right? Spice, right? Spice. What was the saying actually? I forgot the. Variety is a spice of life. Yeah. Well, we'll go with variety is a spice of life. Let's extend it to a new mnemonic, right? Or new cliche. Let's expand that cliche. Variety is a spice of life. Say no to deja vu. You hate spice. Okay, and then I'm gonna be really serious about this now. Let's wind it back. Variety in moderation is the spice of life. However, consistency is the foundation of life. So when you have like a consistent life is built on sprinkles of spice, right? The idea of variety is a spice of life is it's added to a foundation of consistency. So it's not devoid of spice. Your life, your foundation is not devoid of spice, is what I come to interpret that cliche, right? That saying. Step back a little and view sprinkling spice on your bowl of foundation, the consistency of your foundation. So it's spice, the variety is not the dominant aspect of that. So you still get your deja vu, right? You still get your deja vu, but you can also make it a little bit spicy from time to time. I gave it more of a what was my low percentage ask? 5% of your free time. 5% of your free time, go do discovery and problem solving. That means doing something without foreknowledge, but with an intent of extracting information. And then the rest, you know, iterations, refinement. It's kind of nice, very consistent. And going back to some of the stuff that I share personally, I still play Hearthstone. I play PSO2 NGS, and I play Neverwinter. And that takes up about 2.5 hours of my time each day. How do I liberate 2.5 hours of time? I do other things while I'm doing that too. So, I know that there are people out there who live extremes. Here's one extreme. The guy, I forgot who the name was, but someone popularized it recently. The micro efficiency guy or something, where they it's not even micro, it's hyper efficiency. Basically, this guy first how do I say, advocate for constantly squeezing more and more efficiency out of your life. It's like that's fantastic until it's in totality, in my opinion. That's not moderated efficiency, it's just hyper efficiency. So that ultimately will leave no room for creative problem solving, because once it becomes incredibly efficient, how do you solve problems when there's no room to solve problems? The moment you solve problems and do critical thinking, your efficiency plummets. And it can feel very, very awful, largely because emotionally you're ready for being an efficient life. And that sounds like the internet culture to this day. If someone removed 5 minutes of your TikTok time, and your TikTok time is so efficient because you spend all of that time with it, 5 minutes is going to feel like eternity to, like, I don't know, do a Duolingo lesson. Doing a Duolingo lesson will feel like eternity compared to the 5 minutes that you've honed over and over and over again due to consistency. And it's so consistent that you've forgotten all the TikTok learning capacity. Like, I'm being as fair as I can. You can learn things and remember things from TikTok, but it is so consistently similar in the way you're interacting with it that it might as well be deja vu. Right? It's actually to the point, it's so scary that I can count the number of times I see the same clip on YouTube Shorts. I don't use TikTok, but on YouTube Shorts. Yet someone could do it for hours and not be able to be aware that they've consumed like 20%. Like 20%. Okay, that's a little harsh. I'm going to say 50% of that content that they consumed in 2 hours isn't even unique to each other in that pool. So it's kind of like flashing the letter A in front of you 50% of the time, and that person did not even process that it occurred 50% of the time. It goes back to that short story I was talking about, where I saw a cat video and I saw someone repost that cat video with a slight music variation, and then repost that cat video in a compilation of cat videos, of which it includes cat videos that are going to be shown later in the clip. And then there is a compilation of those compilations. And it's like wild, because I don't doom scroll yet. I don't doom scroll like in a habit forming way. So all of these things are so alarming to me. Like, I spent 2 hours or not really 2 hours, it was like 30 minutes. And 20 minutes of it was watching the same cat video in a different format. So when it comes to like knowledge and wisdom, given proportionality to the amount of time you're spending, not only is the mechanical thing making it so passive, the literal content itself does not present a potential for that person to emergently be inspired by anything, right? So all of it combined, you get people like, and it's not intentional. Again, I don't want to make it sound like someone maliciously did this. It is by design. That's how efficiency works. It's efficient when someone can consume the most content that they want to see in the shortest amount of time, and then you multiply that and you scale it up. It's an unintentional consequence of forgetting emotional awareness, right? It's forgetting that you're human. You're alleviating the human side of things. When you're constantly promoting efficiency, that's, in my opinion, the greatest antidote to in this modern age is TikTok. And you don't have to be aware that it's happening, largely because it doesn't matter if you're human with emotions anymore. It's optimized to be efficient. So there's no malicious intent. I think it's the consequence of embracing something so full-heartedly without moderating it, largely because humans are terrible at moderating things. It's a discipline that requires endless and lifetime of practice. Otherwise, yeah, sure, the outcome would be doom scrolling. It's kind of like that experiment about recreational drug use, right? It's like the rat experiments. This was like a dubious, unethical, maybe possible, but like testing addiction, right? Simulating addiction in animal studies. When a button causes the animal to have great satisfaction, usually there's some sort of stimulant for dopamine, for example, like dopamine research. That animal, given the opportunity, would prefer to press that button until they die than looking at alternative solutions and accessibility to that. That's, now we're talking about animals here. That's, yeah, it sounds very, but that study was necessary in my opinion, or like it revealed a lot of important information, right? And humans are quite similar in that nature. However, we do have other abilities, and you know, we also have like what is that word? Agency. I like to believe that the people who are still doom scrolling today at this very moment, or being attached to a device, still have the capacity, right? The potential to gain agency over their actions. I'm choosing to learn a language. We're going back to the original prompt now. I'm choosing to learn a language based on the very likely case, the bottom line, that I will extract beneficial skills, at the also be open-minded to any active, any beneficial skills that's emergent from me actively being part of the process, as opposed to passively trusting a number with no regard for my own self-interest. That's kind of like using something that makes you feel good and choosing never to understand why it makes you feel good. TikTok. I'm using it as an analogy for other real serious things, but that is a great example. So yes, goal-oriented things is a first step. Being successful, consistently achieving your goals is fantastic. But humans can do more than that. I believe most people in this world who are healthy, free of any genetic dispositions, are able to do far more than jump to the end and look at a goal. They are able to appreciate why, how they achieve those goals. And that separates all of the stuff that I'm talking about. The intent, emergent properties, how to apply it, how to apply creatively your skills to other things, and also probably reduce deja vu. And drifting. I don't like drifting. I don't know what's a better word for this, but drifting is my catchphrase for those who are way too passive in their life. So if you feel like you're drifting, spice. Add some variety. Sort of like everywhere being shortened on social media, people are using TS to mean this. Oh boy. I'm not sure if I've seen it yet, but I can't wait to misread that. while that is I still hope we're getting towards the peak like we talked about. Yes, a critical moment. Yes, I think we're reaching an inflection point, Rokal. It takes a long. Humans take a while to come up with solutions, and they have to reach a critical mass and an inflection point prior to innovating. But they sure are great at doing that when we reach an inflection point, and I think we're reaching an inflection point now. I think another layer of passivity is that people will be looking for TikToks that they think they will enjoy watching, and if it doesn't seem to match, they will scroll without the intaking the knowledge. Yeah. I say this as much as I can. On when people feel bad, but also good, right? There are. I really don't like saying this, but over my like 6+ years of streaming, there are far more people who share sad or apathy or down negative selected things, and most of the time I would encourage them to be cautious, be conscious, be active in why those are negative, because with that knowledge comes catharsis, and then with that knowledge you can circumvent it and or be interested in your own sadness. It sounds terrible and it sounds terrifying, and it doesn't work all the time, of course. I try to stay positive and inject some positivity while encouraging them to explore their sadness, largely because understanding the sadness is what will give you that knowledge, intaking that knowledge. TikTok is so efficient that it removes the possibility of that even happening. Like, for example, when you scroll past 30, right? TikTok just doesn't stop and say, hey, you've rapidly scrolled past 30 of them. Here's 5-minute timer. You got a 5-minute timeout. Reflect on why you just scrolled 30 minutes very rapidly, right? There's no time to process that. You're not the process. So it also works for good things too. Good things at first are also the victim of complacency, and that is less a problem, largely because the people who are able to get to that point already have problem-solving skills for that. Here's an example. Someone who's very good at running, right? And they're running really well at the top of their level. Eventually, they're gonna say, I run so well here, let's go explore a different discipline because I'm becoming complacent in my own field. So it is a double standard. It's not the same. On the good end of the spectrum, by happenstance, the characteristics required for someone to become complacent at something that they're good at tend to involve enough awareness and investment in that, because of like feedback and whatnot, that they would explore other things to carb that complacency. Now, in very rare cases, maybe not so much, but those are rare cases. So yes, unfortunately, that's why I would argue, anecdotally speaking, from an opinion piece, that I encounter most people on the other end, the end that they don't understand their sadness or depression before it becomes a point of no return, right? You're in so deep that you require an external source, a support system that can radically, maybe, cut the circular line, but briefly, somewhere. So that's kind of a good place to be hopeful about, right? Be hopeful about. Don't drift through life, folks. Add a little spice. I know your spice tolerance might be terrible, but occasionally add spice, and figurative spice. I mean, if you want to take it literally, go out there, add a little spice to your food. It might be a negative experience. It might be a positive experience. If it's a negative experience, go explore why it's negative, right? Go explore. Understanding the process is something the internet has effectively removed. You no longer have to process anything. Critical thinking, problem solving is a very inefficient task. It's a skill nonetheless, and you can get better at that skill with practice, but it is an inefficient task. Why solve problems when a problem is already solved for you? Convenience is the antithesis of of developing problem solving skills and critical thinking. If convenience is there, you have no incentive to be solving any problems or involved in critical thinking. And once someone become complacent with convenience, then you have TikTok, you have YouTube, you have Google. There's a place to leverage that, right? And then there's a place that doesn't. And one of them is hobbies. In my opinion, hobbies are not a place for efficiency. If you're making yourself more and more efficient with your hobby, you're effectively, in my opinion, more and more likely to fall out of love with that hobby. Passion and love is independent of efficiency. Now, when you're working and you need to get results, leverage that efficiency. That's what the machines were built to leverage necessity, right? Hobbies are not. If you're constantly trying to say, how do I complete my hobby in the shortest amount of time? Like, not in the sense of if the speed is intrinsic to the hobby. We're talking about the aspect of getting the activity over with, right? Like, if you like language learning, we're going to bring it back to language learning. If you say you like language learning and your whole goal is getting over it with, getting that over with, then that's already a red flag to me. In fact, I met someone recently that said that. They said, oh yeah, 2 hours, I'm just trying to get it over with. And I'm like, get it over with? Like, so, and then I asked them a question. It's like, oh, I like this, but I'm looking forward to playing the game some more. It's like, I think you're giving me mixed message. Oh, I know what it was. It was Yakuza. I was playing Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and someone's first comment was, I was playing through the main story quest, and that person's like, oh yeah, I still need to get over with the story. And then I'm like, do you like the game? I mean, why would you want to get the story over with? And then they said, oh, I really like the game, I don't want the story to be over, so I'm like taking my time. It's like, then why did you phrase it that way? Like, it sounded like something that you didn't want. Not that I know enough about this stranger, but that language shows a lack of clarity, and that's kind of the stuff that I think about a lot when I hear people talk to me and I ask questions, follow up. I don't ever reveal what my intent is, unless they ask. So if you're ever curious why I asked a certain question, definitely feel free to ask. Oh, their turn. Good morning. Morning. Let's see. Carrying on knowing the end goal is unreachable is one of the things you love about living beings. Yeah, especially other human beings. Like, think about it. Think about how assured you must be, how intellectually interesting and motivated you have to be when you can tell someone by smiling, go watch One Piece. Sorry, I'm like watching. I've been watching One Piece for a very long time now. I'm like getting close to episode 200. The idea of shonen and stuff like One Piece is like you have a dream, and they go after the dream, whether it happens or not. The thing that people like to watch that show is because the dream is still there, but it keeps going. Like, even if they reach the dream in that show, there's probably a dream after that dream. And that's kind of the idea that keeps one youthful, right? But you don't have to be literally young to stay youthful. And having an unreachable goal and smiling like, well, it's the journey that matters, not the destination. But you could have a destination in mind. It's pretty nice. Obviously, we're being a little reductive here. There are a lot of other things that can happen during that, but a nice, very optimistic sentiment. It does actually, but only on the version of TikTok for under 12 years old. Oh, okay, so they added some pause period. Yeah. I thought about this for all intensive purposes. If the average viewer, for example, this is going to sound like a little bit difficult, but I would love for future products, future monster houses like TikTok and YouTube to impose a dynamic SRS system that proportionally increases the encouragement of processing, like reflection, to the activity of the person. So for example, you already have this data is already readily available. This person is algorithms already tracking how long you watch something before you switch and your interests and whatnot. However, I would love to have them input a dynamic, it's an opt-in, and it's also a choice, an opt-in method, not like a default. The opt-in where they would have a safeguard where if you watched an hour, like the minimum viewing of a video is an hour, then the algorithm would suggest maybe 1/6 of the times, like, hey, spend 10 minutes doing something else, right? Or spend 10 minutes watching something that's unrelated to that thing, something like that. There's like exposure, you know, like this distilling, this having experimental things in which you can test how to break and encourage various things and have it a dynamic process, like an SRS thing where like, oh wow, you've done this for an hour, you don't really need to do much of this anymore for the day, perhaps go out and breathe for 10 minutes, or it can be very dynamic. But the most simplest, like the most reductive experiment would be something like, here's a 10-minute ad. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But hear me out. The ad situation is such an ironic solution to those who consistently do something than it was before. Where, like, for example, if you consume the same frequency of content for 1 hour straight, regardless of what that is, a 5-minute ad after that long consecutive will give you time to be angry, upset, and possibly even encourage a time of reflection. But 5 minutes is not a very long time compared to 1 hour, but 5 to 1 hour, I'm doing like a rough, it's not 5%, it's like 10% of your time, but that kind of thing, that would be interesting. Making like a proportional amount of destabilizing one's consistent behavioral habits while also creating some sort of like, it's so weird to tell people that deliberately doing something uncomfortable is possibly a healthy habit, micro habit to do to counter the selective bias of the algorithm. That's wild. I don't think I feel like back in the day people wouldn't have enough permutations of the same type of information that they enjoy accessible in the first place. Now it's completely accessible. If you want cat videos, you could occupy your entire time with cat videos. And what even crazier is you can't even, sometimes people don't even process they're watching the same one. Sometimes people process that they are watching the same one and they don't care. right? It doesn't matter to them because they don't see the harm in it, and that's fine, right? Until it's not fine, which is when it consumes so much part of your time to the point where you no longer are very functional, right? That's a worst case scenario though. When we talk about motivation and you drew a graph of it going up, then hitting a peak with a big drop afterwards, do you think that matches up with the graph of Dunning-Kruger? No, Dunning-Kruger... the Dunning-Kruger effect is a bell curve, right? It's basically a bell curve, right? Or was it something else? So it was like... It just took normal distribution, and I don't actually know. Maybe it's somewhat similar. This is a curveball, but what product, if any, I use for my hair? My product? I use a shampoo and conditioner set. The current one I'm on is a tea tree thing, the original tea tree product. I usually just buy large container and it lasts for like a 1.5 to 2 years, and then I try something new. I think I bought a new product recently, but yes, hair products. All right, that's enough. Look up Dunning-Kruger effect and look at the image. I understand, I know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is and what the shape is, but I don't think it has different representations. It shows a sharp increase then a drop off once you understand how little you know. Yeah. The Dunning-Kruger effect is very it has a simplified one and it has a continual one. So the one that I adapted, like this is the Dunning-Kruger effect, but most of the time the Dunning-Kruger effect is restricted to this depiction. And the motivation stuff is very similar to this. Actually, a lot of things is very similar to this. So I wouldn't be comfortable in saying it's matches up, but it might be coincidental. It's coincidentally very similar to that. Like the Dunning-Kruger effect, this is the value of despair in the Dunning-Kruger. It's not necessarily part of the theorem, but when you get to this point here, right, it's often called the value of despair. And then this, when you reach an inflection point here, it's the point of enlightenment. And then this kind of tapers off because it's asymptotal to the mastery of something. Yeah, so it's not a coincidence. It's not a, like, what I mean is I use Dunning-Kruger's little like thing as a basic curve to draw for motivation, and maybe like balance of complacency and whatnot. Dunning-Kruger though, the Dunning-Kruger is addressing something else specifically, largely due to the balance of competence, right? The perception of competence and the reality of competence. How one perceives one's own competence change with one's reality of competence. And then I did a coincidental lineup with motivation. Yeah, it's very elegant. It also makes it easier, slightly reductive, but easier to explain. Yeah. So what was it when we talked about, do you think that it matches up with, I would say yes, the original prompt? Yes, more or less. Is it true? I'm not a psychologist and I don't have like access to privy knowledge that would allow me to do population statistics or random sampling experiments to prove that's true. but meta-analyses would probably be sufficient to demonstrate that there's similarities between motivation and the perception of competence. Probably. Now, we're going back to this. If what is the read on women? Wait, what time is it? Oh. Joanne. Okay. Okay. Fresh. So does that go on Nama? Does Nama stand alone? I could try Nama. Do you read a lot of psychology, Protocol, or is that a passing thing? I think Dunning-Kruger gets shout out quite often. I don't want to wield too many theorems and whatnot without suggesting that I don't have a command of it, because I really don't. I don't even know the methodology for the original data analyses that came about that relationship.
Nama.
I use what, like, for example, I still remember the Wikipedia entry for Dunning-Kruger that I looked at. Not too much. You get interested in a lot of aspects of psychology, but you tend not to research them to a deep enough extent that I would be confident teaching it. Yeah, me too. That's largely my default. There are a few things that I can possibly teach with some form of confidence. However, I wouldn't do it in this setting. Right. I wouldn't do this in this setting. But I wouldn't mind doing it professionally, again, possibly in the future. Not anything I would do in this format. I think it's incredibly inappropriate to mix the two. Does telling someone the definition of a word count as teaching? Telling the definition of word count as teaching? Yes. Pretty much all of the stuff counts as teaching. Implicit, explicit counts as teaching. Actually, in fact, I would argue from my experience now, explicit counts more as teaching than implicit. Which, that's kind of weird, because a lot of time back in the day, it would have been a coin toss, if not 60-40 for implicit teaching, right? Like, what I mean is conventional teaching, like parents, lessons, life lessons. Those are implicit teaching moments, not explicit teaching moments. But nowadays, because of the way the internet works, right? Though now that the internet works this way, explicit teaching or teaching itself is nearly 90% explicit. So when someone says, hey, let me explain this to you, Google that. That's explicit teaching. You're explicitly telling someone how to find the definition of something, as opposed to either learning it yourself, how to explain it, or they learn from the incomplete knowledge you have. Because there's a lot of implicit teaching involved when two people try to come up with an idea, but neither party has complete knowledge. Explicit is when you go acquire the knowledge and then agree that the knowledge is the same. That's explicit, right? We explicitly agree that this is to be true. I went out to find the facts and you went out to find the facts and Google provided the same facts. We both agree. That's explicit teaching. You definitely taught me alone more than a few things. What if I, well, I appreciate that. What if I teach someone the definition of something by making it the answer to a riddle I gave them? That would be an excellent experiment, social experiment. And I would argue you would not only form a method, like form an attachment to that person might form an attachment to you. That's engagement. What you just described is engagement. That is teaching with engagement, the intent of getting the person's attention and actively participating. That is what teaching used to be like, right? What does a teacher do? They do both. It's a combination of implicit and explicit teaching. But the internet has changed that. You don't have to do implicit teaching anymore. It's explicit. If someone can explain to you what would happen, then you don't need to learn anything. So here's the weird thing. I just said you don't need to learn anything. Learning, you don't need to learn half the things. You don't need to learn how to get to the answer. You learn the answer. So it's still teaching. Yes. And to the detriment of other people who misunderstand me. When I say, does telling someone the definition of a word count as teaching? I say yes. But not in the way that everyone wants to understand about learning. And when I say yes, it counts as teaching, I'm not asking someone to teach me that in that way, because I disagree. I firmly disagree. It's overrepresented. Explicit teaching is something that has been normalized, and because it's normalized, I don't disagree. Well, I agree with other people. That's the way they prefer to learn, right? However, that is not what I'm demonstrating. My goal is not to explain to you how to explicitly learn something, right? And here I am using WaniKani, which employs explicit learning. SRS is nearly the pinnacle of explicit learning, right? You do something, they tell you the thing, and then you're supposed to remember it. They do everything possible to help you remember the thing before testing the thing. That is explicit learning. Everything is explicit. You should know the answer because you already know the answer. Video games used to be about discovery and inquisition. Now there's a pocket of video games that are like that. And then the other pocket deals with explicit learning again. Like, dude, man, I lost this game because the game didn't tell me what I could do. Right? Get upset because the game didn't explain to you how to win. Okay. I'm going to lurk now. As much as I love to keep chatting, you can't handle the guilt of keeping you from saying, alright, fair enough, bro call. Alright. We're gonna get back. We did get our other review exercises. That's nice. Can I use like me and Gene? Yeah, no worries. I got you. I got you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the concern. Now, why would this be Why would I gravitate towards daikoe instead of taikoe? Or oko? No, ogoe. That sounds better. Right? Ongoe. I don't know the mnemonic for this, but ongoe sounds right.
大声
Or ogoe. Okay. Enter. We have new. And
天国
Goku. Are we doing Ichi? Anchin.
安心
方向
Oh.
全日本
Zen-Nihon.
国
I screwed this up once, sorry. Twice actually. Yep. I almost screwed up again. I keep typing C instead of S.
出社
Shut.
南東
Nanto.
米国
Eikoku. Ne?
Fume
不明。ええ
け
うーん。
南 用いる
用いる。うん。
東
東。全国
全国
全国。
州
州。to to do carry out a task, to do a task, to use something. To perform a task? Or to use, right? Was this a kyoku too?
Kyoku.
Kyoku. One's life. One's life. Or a person's life, right? And Jin one's life. Jinsei. Whoops.
人生
Meikyoku? Oh, wait. Yes.
名曲
Meikyoku. Nationwide.
Ryojitsu.
両日 両方ね
両方。
両方両方両方This is not umbrella. It is not umbrella. But is it spoon? Or is it umbrella? No. Umbrella was Hansa here. Hansa Hero. Eh? No, spoon has a handle. Or a hand in it. So what was this for? Wait, is this actually umbrella? Am I being a pet? This is an umbrella because of the handle. And what was Hansa Hero's version of this? Right? I can't think of anything else, yeah.
Ryote.
Yote. Koku. Kokuho.
国宝
Uho. Anzen.
安全
Anzen. Toru.
取る
土星、
土星。All right, we got our other 47. Made it to 7 o'clock pro call. Nice. Although it's 8 o'clock. Nice. Convenience. Secret. Secret intentions. Secret intentions. Speaking of secret intentions, right? I did say it audibly before we started. I'm like, oh, you know what? I needed to fill like 20 minutes, so we might as well make it an hour. Put a smile on each other's face with intent. Speak with intent. New ground. Got
質、
質。
国王、
国王。地下。
地下、
が。
九州、
九州。
知る、
知る。
東方、
東方。
夜、
夜。
海外、
海外。
中国、
中国。
今夜、
今夜。
本州、
本州。
金星、
金星。
全力、
全力。
平安、
平安。
思う
Mo. Oh wait, pro call. UK. I don't know if you watched. I'm not sure if we established if you watched the Lost in a Pond guy, but I watched a video yesterday that was really, really fun. It was about time zones. He was specifically talking about the quote unquote, he was using the United States time zone situation as a culture shock, but there was a really fun punchline at the end. But I don't know if you watched it. But the reason why is whenever I think about you mentioning that you bring up the UK-ness, the Britishness in it, the punchline was funny. He cited a bunch of idiosyncrasies where like he used to coincidentally lived in states where there are multiple time zones, and those time zones are arbitrarily defined by geography and like politics and geopolitics, and where you can like travel north and south and still change timelines and the like time zones, and then where there are basically a west coast area and an east coast area which is only 1 hour apart that cross 3 different time zones in the United States. And his punchline was, the reason why this was a culture shock is that UK is one of the fewer examples in which the entire country agrees on one time zone. That was a cool punchline, because what he thought was weird about the United States was actually the more common thing that happens around the world. When you look at the whole world and look at how time zones are broken up in different countries and whatnot, the UK actually stands out as a very unique case, a less likely case for less likely, sorry, a rarer case. They're in the minority of which one country. That's a good one. Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. Like, I understood that the United States time zone, because it's big and then there's like mountains and whatnot, and that's why it's called mountain time in certain areas and whatnot. Like, a single state could have 2 time zones. Actually, a single state can have 3 time zones. In Nevada, there's like technically, and then he talked about daylight savings time, right? To throw it in even worse, like time zones and daylight savings time. And then suddenly he pulled a wool and said right near the end, it's like, well, looking at the grand scheme of things, it's actually because he's British and he now lives in the United States and he's both, a dual citizen, or like what I mean is he has a dual life. And he looked at the bigger perspectives that, yeah, you know what, the reason is a culture shock is because outside the UK, it's actually fairly common to have multiple time zones in a country, and it's not necessarily based on size either, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, you got me. Way to go, Lawrence. You got me. That's perspective right there. I love the little like sun perspective swap by stepping back a little and saying, yeah, it's not so weird when you look at the grand scheme of things. That's kind of what it reminded me of. US is so weird. Wait, I'm the weird one. Exactly. I think that's humorous. I love when the awareness leads to like humor. Like, oh, well, by coincidence, Lawrence happened to come from a country that had a unified time, and then to a country that didn't, and because of that realization, he laid it out really, really well. Like, he set up, it's like hook, line, and sinker. He set it up and composed it in a manner that's like, this is what it is like. Realization, right? You realize something when you finally leave your comfort zone, right? Like a different place, you realize how quirky it is, and then you continue to expand and realize, well, it's not so quirky. That kind of thing is so palpable. Like, the way he composed the video was very intentional. And I absolutely love videos that are incredibly intentional. They're very it makes it feel so contrived and intellectual. It's very British, honestly. Like, hats off to Lawrence, but man, he is most definitely still got his very, very strong British roots. And I actually like watching his content for that reason, because he's another person who is now in fact multicultural, and videos like that is made possible due to the nature of someone being multicultural. Otherwise, they usually don't tackle perspective shifts over and over again like this. And that's what made talking to you made me think about it, because you, for all intents and purposes, no pressure, but you are the UK representative that I have at this moment. So now what do we have? Irish, UK, Norway, Germany, Italy, Malaysia, Brazil, and then a couple of states in the United States: Florida, New York, Texas, California. I haven't talked to the Canadian in a long time now, though. Yeah. I'm glad you found it funny. As often English humor doesn't get translated well in the United States. I don't know about that. You might say like, yeah, sure, that's the case, but man, British programming is exceptionally well received. I might even argue they're overhyped in the United States perspective. I'm not sure British finds like American stuff interesting. I personally watch more British stand-up than I watch American stand-up. You know, I mean, it doesn't speak a lot because I also probably watch more Japanese things than American things. Also, you should hope no Scottish person comes on stream, because they hate when England is talked about like it's the UK. Scottish really want to stand out from English. I understand that. Then we spend the whole time talking about the time of not Scandinavia, but the Scandinavian English conflict, along with the Saxon and Saxony and period, Anglo-Saxon period. I know quite a lot about Anglo-Saxon period, so I wouldn't think I dread that or not. Actually, we would probably talk about a lot of depictions of that, especially popular depictions of that. Yeah, and then Normans, yeah. Celtic Britannia. Britannia is a very interesting one too. Britannia period. The Celtic Britannia. Yeah, then Anglo-Saxon, then yeah, the Normans. I think I know least about the Norman period. Then I think the most exposure I had was the Celtic, a little less so Britannia, and Anglo-Saxon is probably the most popular depiction in terms of that type of thing. And then I guess the Norman period would be somewhat related to the Scandinavian conflict, or in the Anglo-Saxon period is largely the Scandinavian conflict. Anglo-Saxon is your favorite period of Britain's history? I see. Yeah. Largely this is due to video games and more or less entertainment, right? Like, for example, Anglo-Saxon, that period is analogous to War of the Three Kingdoms. And then what is akin to the War of the Three Kingdoms? The Shogunate. And then what is akin to the Shogunate? The French Revolution. The French Revolutionary period. What is akin to that? Well, and I'm talking about media, right? Media usage of these things. War, right? Depiction of war and like conflict and whatnot. Are there more? Spanish conquistadors, right? Spanish expansion and colonialism. This is I'm listing a bunch of things that I know historically due to video games and media, and that stuck with me for a while. William Wallace, hats off to William Wallace. Age of Empires, Age of Empires. Of course, we have the communist regime and the Cold War. Bay of Pigs, Normandy, the British night raids during World War II. I don't know how to call that. The Red Scare. There's so many depictions of modern, like of the contemporary history conflicts that I've learned quite a lot from entertainment. And then like due to entertainment, I was curious about their background. The more like a recent movie would be like Dunkirk, right? Dunkirk, Band of Brothers, letters from Iwo Jima, Iwo Jima, and Flags of Our Father. Plenty of things that get one far more interested in history. Obviously, I'm not saying it's all good or bad. We're not talking about the moralities or ethics, but being educated by being inspired by entertainment and whatnot is can be very powerful to gain some perspective on things and make it very relatable. You can become quite relatable. The land we now call Britain is one of the last pieces to have humans inhabit. Fair enough. Due to the harsh climates, yeah, the Homo sapiens arrived much later than in most countries. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Outside of Antarctica. Or maybe someplace in Nevada. Or maybe a few other places, like across the Sahara. Sahara. That's great that Mina is giving you this knowledge. Obviously, Roman had a bit of effect on Britain as well. Yes, the Roman Empire, right? Do you know much about medieval Britain, like the monarchs? I do to some extent. Largely, I would say the most classical period would be the Victorian period, and any period across the Renaissance. So the Renaissance period and the Victorian period. Henry the Eighth, was that around like Versailles and stuff with Louis as well? I don't know if that was the same period. Now I'm thinking French, right? And does that line up with the Vatican and any period that deals with the Enlightenment? So most of my British history deals with the scholastic side of things. So the Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution is not monarch, obviously, but so there was a monarch still then, but the Renaissance and the Enlightened period is probably the most exposure. And Victorian, Enlightened, and Renaissance are the periods for the UK. Yeah, big battles between Catholicism and Protestant because of Henry VIII. Yeah. I'm not very great with titular names, like title names of monarchs. I usually remember based on their context. Like I don't remember which Henry is Henry VIII. Like in this case, I do remember who Henry VIII is, but what I mean is the subtleties between naming serially because of the titular inherited title can be problematic. Like which Charles am I thinking about? The Lion-Hearted? Was that Charles or Richard? For example, see that's where I get lost, right? Who was the Lion-Hearted? The one, and I only remember the Lionhearted because that was the name. It's Richard, yeah, Richard Lionheart. Yeah, that would be something that I would remember, largely because they didn't go by like Richard the Third. Like which Richard was that? Richard Lionheart. Was it the third? The fourth? I can't. It's very tough for me to remember the numerical thing. Like second? Okay, it was Richard the Second. What about Mary? There were a couple Marys and Elizabeth. I remember the prominent Elizabeth. But Elizabeth is more the modern. It's modern time. Mary Queen of Scots. That's right. Bloody Mary. Yes. Yep. Mary Queen of Scots. See, I would remember Mary Queen of Scots more than I remember whatever the titular name was. Largely because there's more nuance to the naming. Yeah. I do know quite a bit of superficial British history. I like to think, hear me out, hear me out. I know. The United States is a big place. It has a lot of people with varying educational systems, but generally people who've got to college, like through college, like millennials, I suppose, a good large number of millennials actually have exposure to almost all the things that I said. So like this isn't something that I would say I'm particularly above average in. These are very common, fairly like deja vu, back in the head thing. When you mention these things to an American, maybe around my generation, they're more likely, oh yes, I've heard of it, right? That's kind of like asking a British person, what is the state north of Oregon? And why was it called the Oregon Trail? That something something that, or what was the Louisiana Purchase? Like which states was part of the Louisiana Purchase, and how what does that have to do with the Mississippi River? And why is the Mississippi River so important to the United States? Yeah, anyways, you say you gotta go for a minute, so yeah, no worries. Okay. Refocus. It's funny because I'm not so sure myself anymore. Okay. Okay. Dirt land, yeah.
MAKU
Good.
有名
Yume. Um.
中東
Oh.
文化
Bunka.
Tochi
Koichi. I have some things that I'm ready to say when Protocol comes back.
歩く、
歩く。
地図、
地図。
一
一
歩、
歩。
明るい、
明るい。
後で、
後で。後で。Wait. No. No. This is the special one. Right? Souvenir. 出て。
すべて、
すべて。Wrong pitch accent. Wrong pitch. すべて。すべて。
不安、
不安。
安い、
で、
四国、
四国。
外国人、
外国人。Still all? All, but just all again? All, entire, everything? Sticking with all. Shikoku. Oh.
東北、
東北。
午後、
午後。
ある、
ある。
東京、
Tokyo. All right. Business as usual. Okay. We're looking good. Looking good. Go over our stuff. Things have been a little uneventful at the beginning and at the end of stuff, huh? We'll have to fill in somehow soon. Neck, Yakuza, Death, Jet, Knife, Fortune, City, Long, Mama, Angel, Hung, Grain, Eat, Sheep, Ladle, Lion, Boil, Blood, House. Let's go over our reads for these pinky guys. It's interesting. The vast number of kuns I've already heard, so they kind of rely on legacy versus the vast number of ons which are being introduced here. So it kind of coincidentally works out. Choku, Jiki, Chu, ち、おも、や、ね、や、や、りょう、ぜん、め、ご、こ、か、ちゃ、よ、お、お、し、ちょ、こ、はい、あん、けつ、と、せ、か、かつ、へん、よく、こく、まい、ち、ゆ、よ、ね、ち、なん、ぜん、へん、しつ、くび、くび、ちょく、ちょく、し、と、いえ、いえ、や、うち。Right? And that's it. Solid. Solid, solid, solid. That's all. That's it for Japanese. Our Japanese session today. WaniKani. If you're gonna watch this later, arigatou gozaimasu. Right? So for those who are only interested in Japanese, minasan, mata ne. I'm gonna get up, take a quick bathroom break, and I'll be back for Hanza Hero. Thank you, thank you.